So our top story today, Jim Crow comes to Jersey. You may have heard about the voter suppression efforts in other states, but New Jersey's not alone. And in a twist, here in Middlesex County, in the great city of New Brunswick, it was actually Republicans that were championing voter rights and the Democrat members of the Board of Elections trying to close down voting locations and make it harder to vote in an upcoming local election. We are just now 10 days away from the school board election for New Brunswick. We have these every year. They're in April. It used to be every town had their school election in April, but we didn't have school elections in New Brunswick. Our mayor got to pick the board for us. Another example of the lack of democracy in our city. And on the fifth try, residents overthrew that system, took the mayor's power for themselves, and now we have an elected school board. But our elections are in April. Right around the same time we started having elections, a law was passed signed by Governor Christie, and now the most communities have moved their school elections to November. So we're in the minority here. We are one of only 13 school districts that still has these April elections, but we can't forget about us. And unfortunately, the powers that be kind of forgot about us. And so unlike last year, there's not going to be any automatic mail-in ballots due to the pandemic. So far, every election held in the pandemic, they've automatically mailed a ballot to every active registered voter. They have had, in some cases, less polling places than normal for the in-person voting on election day. But to make up for it, they sent every active voter a mail-in ballot. Well, this year, the governor has done no such executive order. They will not be mailing out automatically those mail-in ballots. Only a fraction of voters are getting the mail-in ballots. So you could imagine how shocked and surprised I was to learn on March 17 that the Board of Elections and the City Clerk of New Brunswick were proposing to close 6 out of the 14 voting locations here in New Brunswick, including some popular locations that serve low-income communities, renters in huge apartment complexes, students, seniors, communities of color. And in some cases, folks would now have to, if they don't have a vehicle, walk up to 2 miles to go vote, crossing over and under huge highways. And ultimately, we can see where this is going. Less people were going to vote. So I personally mobilized along with 3 of the candidates running in that school board election and many outraged residents. We spoke up. We attended the April 1st meeting of the Middlesex County Board of Elections, one of the strangest meetings I've ever been at in my career as a reporter and an activist. We fought hard to try to restore some of these polling locations. And the good news is that 2 of them are actually going to be restored thanks to our efforts. It was a very strange meeting. Again, the board was conflicted. Boards of election have 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans by law. Every board is 4 members with 2 from each of the major parties. And they disagreed about how to handle this in like I said, an ironic twist. It was the Republicans that wanted all the polling locations open, and the Democrats who wanted to shut down those 6 locations. The vote was split. It was a tie vote. And the board disagreed about what that tie even meant. The Democrats were saying that means no polling locations will be open. And the Republicans said, well, if it's a tie vote, the motion fails. And therefore, we go back to having all 14 open. Ultimately, they were able to reach a compromise. They said, we're going to approve 8 locations and then go back, talk to the municipal clerk, try to find a few of these closed locations that could potentially be reopened and done so in time for the April 20th election. And then they took my suggestion, held a special emergency meeting this past Wednesday where they added back 2 of the closed locations, the New Brunswick Housing Authority headquarters that serves our public housing population, and the Roosevelt School on Livingston Avenue, which is another community school location that actually serves a lot of people who don't have cars and it's going to make it a little bit easier for those folks to vote. But there's still 4 locations that are going to be closed. This is clearly voter suppression at work here. I'm particularly disappointed that Rutgers University, my alma mater, did not respond to the outreach from the government or from our newspaper about why they won't be opening the Rutgers Labor Education Center. This is a polling place that serves one of our election districts. Normally, the people who rent apartments in Tove Manor apartments can walk just a few hundred feet to go vote. Now they're going to have to go up to 2 miles over and under a highway just to get to a voting place all the way in a different neighborhood. And that is unfortunately going to be the final decision. The poll books and everything are being prepared for the election now, and it seems like it's too late to get more locations open. Rutgers University, are they complicit in voter suppression? That's a question I'll be asking over the coming weeks. But before we get to your questions and feedback, I want to share with you the highlights from that Board of Elections meeting. This was April 1st, but it was not an April Fool's joke. This is the Board of Elections talking at length about this issue. A number of activists and residents outraged, speaking up at their meeting, asking tough questions. Take a look.
This proposal by the municipal clerk, or wherever it originally came from, eliminates polling locations, which we have never done, at least since I've been on the board. I do not believe that we should eliminate, based on the municipal clerk's suggestion, I do not believe that we should eliminate the 14 polling places that have been in New Brunswick for probably, I know, at least 15 years, perhaps more. I don't think there's any reason to do that.
Really?
Yes.
Do you believe that this year is similar to every other year?
There is no executive order that provides for shrinking the number of polling locations for COVID for these elections, these April elections.
Don, there's no executive order, but the problem that I think we're all trying to wrestle with, okay, is not what we're saying here, is not just lowering the amount of polling places, it's keeping voters safe, our staff safe, our workforce safe, and we have done that all along this whole COVID. Our numbers are up in the state of New Jersey. All I'm saying to you is that this is not the same as 2018 and 19. It's a different situation.
We are calling on you to do the right thing here and maintain all 14 voting locations. This year, folks were taken by surprise to learn that there's a proposal to cut nearly half the voting locations in our city, and specifically in areas that are low-income communities, apartment complexes, seniors, students, and communities of color. What this is wholesale voter suppression, cutting back nearly half the locations and not offering the universal mail-in ballot option that was offered last year. It's simply unacceptable. You're in a position of power here, and I hope that you'll use that power for good and maintain the access to these voting locations, because doing so will enable more people to vote and lower the chances that this dreaded, horrible virus will be transmitted.
What excuse can there possibly be for doing this? You endanger people. You don't keep them safe. You endanger people. You're doing exactly the opposite of what you're claiming to do. That's why this is clear voter suppression. I mean, you're actually stopping people from voting if you do this. There's no excuse for this. Okay, thank you.
May I ask you a smaller question? Ms. Miller, do you know where people voted at Dewey Heights before they voted?
I believe they voted at the Labor Ed Center.
No, they voted at Rutgers Village. Did you know
Well, they
that?
then,
Did you know that?
I didn't know
Okay,
that.
but they did.
That's
Okay.
not true.
Did you?
Excuse where?
Rutgers Village.
It's not the
That's not
nearest
true.
place.
Not only is it the safety, but it's also the integrity of the elections. And I mean, I think this is a very serious problem that, that we face, and we're still facing with a lot of those people that, don't think that the election was really, legitimate. So I would encourage this body to, maintain those voting places.
I grew up without my parents driving. Many of the people that live in New Brunswick, they can't even drive.
Some of you may understand the struggle, but some may not, because you did not live through it. So just think about it. Have the 14 polling places open, and we would be okay.
The most egregious example of this is that they plan to close the New Brunswick Housing Authority, which it sits in the middle, right in the middle of our two huge low-income housing complexes. So that's like centrally located where all the people in public housing can walk and go and vote. And they would have to go down to Jersey Ave. It just doesn't look fair the way it was done. Some of the other places that are closed, so the senior center in my neighborhood, the Hungarian Culture Center, which is the neighborhood of Lincoln Annex, the school that was sold and demolished.
I just don't think that there's any reason for us to change the polling places, because the polling places in place are the 14 that are there. That's what's in place, the 14 that are there. I don't think there's any reason for us to vote to change that to a reduced number.
If you're not going to make a motion, I'll make a motion. I make a motion that we accept clerk's report dated, I don't know what the date was that she gave us the report for the revised of the polling places.
Roll call.
Chairman Agel?
No.
Commissioner Franklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Katz?
No.
Commissioner Moskowitz?
Yes.
Tie vote, motion fails.
No.
Tie vote, motion fails. Check Robert's rules or any other parliamentary procedure.
So now there are no polling places in that?
No, there are.
I'm asking the commissioner, the director, does that mean that there are no polling places now because the motion failed? And we always work with the clerks and mayors to make that determination. By negating this request to just maintain that process, does that mean there are no longer any polling places?
That is not.
I have not voted
That is not
add any
correct.
numbers.
If-
We voted to accept the recommendations of all of the clerks and mayors.
That is not.
I was
correct.
asking,
In every instance, we keep in place the polling locations that have existed before. We have never voted separately to re-adopt the same polling locations on an onward basis. Any changes in terms of polling locations are what we vote on. That's what was made, the motion that was made. If that motion has failed,
but
then
that's
the
my point.
polling
So there will be
locations.
no polling
then the-
places
no.
in same
The
place
polling
because then we
locations-
have to do another motion
No, we don't.
to add
The
that.
polling locations that have been in place for
No.
the last 20 years in
No,
New Brunswick, or more than 20 years
I
in New
will
Brunswick, are in
not
place.
accept that as your ruling.
Pursuant to executive order, they did that, and we adopted those polling places for that election.
And those were the most
based on the
recent polling
requirements of the
places.
executive
Commissioner, I'm
order.
using your own language.
Based on the requirements of
using your
the
own
executive
language.
order, which
Those
were
are the
not
most
addressed in
recent
polling
polling
places.
places.
Let me make a possible compromise here. Since we all agree that 8 is 8, correct? We all agree that 8 is a number that, right? And now we're discussing the other 6. Is to have maybe our administrator and our warehouse supervisor speak with the clerk and try to work out a compromise of what a couple others might be? Is that because we can't do 14.
I see press reports, tap into, et cetera, which say.
I see you talking to the people, I see you making press, I see you making comments all over the press.
I'm making
I
comments
see you making
because I'm
comments,
making
when we
comments
also
because
made,
the
when we
press
also
reports.
made, okay, that nothing is to be commented here too. And you're going out making comments from this board, saying it's the board. Make your own comment for your own commissioner and make it yourself. Don't make it for the board.
I'm not
Thank
making it for the board. The situation on.
I would like to make a motion that we meet, have our administrator and warehouse manager meet with the clerk on Monday, April 5th, and they try to come up with a solution to have more than 8 and less than 14, because we can't do 14. We can't get into some of these polling places.
Which one? How do we know that?
We do know that.
You
How
were
do we know
told
that?
that. You were told that, but
Who
the
was
people
told?
who have
Who
run
told
the
us?
elections, you went to
They
the
did.
council meetings, did you specifically indicate the request for each of the closings so that you don't have to work on, was it Jersey Avenue that you said was so difficult? Did that come up directly with the council and mayor?
I spoke.
We're not speaking, we're not Charlie.
She answered the
Charlie,
question.
Charlie,
I
excuse me.
spoke to the housing authority. They said
Excuse
their
me,
building is
Charlie,
open.
Charlie, you're out of line.
They said their building is
Charlie, you're
available.
out of line.
They said they're available if they want.
No,
She did not ask a question to Charlie Kratovil. She
I
was
was
asking a question.
asking this lady who had mentioned it to us, that's, I apologize, I apologize.
I was not at that city council meeting.
Oh,
We are at the point that we all agree on 8, and we're missing 6. Why can't the administrator, the warehouse manager, and the clerk come to some resolution and get back to us?
If you get back to us and we have specific explanations as to why it's closed and why it can't be open, okay, then we have to decide that. But it's gotta be that fully.
really,
Yes,
really,
yes.
really.
Otherwise, I'm not agreeing to it.
The motion is that as soon as possible, but I'm hoping April 5th, because Good Friday, people are off, is that our administrator, our warehouse manager will have a meeting with the city clerk of New Brunswick to discuss, we are in agreement on 8 to discuss the other 6, which we're thinking 2 are not possible and not available, and to come up with something that they can hopefully bring back to the commission.
I'm going to vote against that. The reason I reference the press reports is because the press reports say, and from the municipal clerk say that the Board of Elections were involved in doing this.
Who
And
wrote
obviously the Board of
that
Elections.
press report?
Where?
Who wrote it?
It's tapped into, it's not Charlie's.
Who wrote it? Just
Chuck
ask them.
O'Donnell.
Who wrote it?
Chuck O'Donnell. It's tappinto.net.
Madam Chair, may I ask you, Mr. Kratovil, did you write any of that article?
I do not work for Tap into New
I didn't
Brunswick.
ask you that question. Did you write any of that article?
No, of course not. I run New Brunswick today. I wrote that article.
My bigger concern is that you're starting to believe that there's voter suppression as part of the reasoning for this. And that, of course, is something that is absolutely unacceptable. My understanding is different from my own experiences, as I said, in terms of elected office, not just this one, that there are many reasons that go into a town's decision.
Chairman Engel?
Yes.
Commissioner Frankel?
Yes.
Commissioner Katz?
No.
Commissioner Moskowitz?
Great, thank you. Yes.
And it's going to come back to us with a specific report of if polling places can't be open, why they can't be open.
I do want to just suggest that the board hold a special meeting to ultimately resolve this issue sometime next week, as soon as possible. Whether that meeting's in person or held through, computer technology, I think it would be wise to reconvene with new information and get the answers that we didn't have here today. For the record, of the 6 polling places, 4 of them are public buildings. One is a Rutgers University building, the Labor Education Center. I reached out to Rutgers and asked if it was available, did not get a response. The other Roosevelt Schools, of course, a Board of Education building. I reached out to see if it was available, did not get a response, and then questioned them at their meeting, and they gave blatantly false information about this matter. The people of New Brunswick are beginning to wake up, and they deserve a voice in their school board. As you remember, we had a whole referendum about it in 2012, and the voters decided we want to elect our school board. We want to have a say in that. And I know some of the commissioners have experience serving on school boards and how important it is and how those elections foster dialogue, democracy, and ultimately make the lives better of the children and the families that depend on the school system. So I really sincerely hope that this board can work with the city and with the public to ensure as many polling places as possible are open.
And welcome back. So that was the highlight reel from the April 1st Middlesex County Board of Elections meeting. I hope you found it as interesting as I did. You heard some of me talking there, some of my friends and neighbors in New Brunswick sticking up for voting rights. And you saw the Republican and Democrat commissioners having it out and at times raising their voices and shouting about articles in the press and other things. They ultimately did decide to restore 2 of the locations that they were planning to close. And yeah, Case, what do you think of all that?
Yeah,
Did
this
you
is
find that interesting?
very, very interesting stuff. I wrote down a couple questions that I had, and I think you might have talked about this. Why wouldn't they have just mail-in ballots like that thing? I think that would just solve this problem. Period. Right?
Well, it's definitely helpful if people get the automatic mail-in ballots. One, it's a reminder that there is an election. Again, we're one of the only towns that has April school board elections. So if people aren't getting that ballot in the mail, it's quite likely that they will forget or it will pass them by completely. So last year we had mail-in ballots sent to every active voter. It was not a perfect system, but we did see an increase in turnout over the prior year, even though there were no voting locations for the general public. So, to me, it would have made sense since we're still in a state of emergency, we're still in a pandemic, to do that. But I think one factor is that Governor Murphy chose to delay the fire district elections in February and move them to the same day as the school board election. Fire district elections are even smaller, even lower turnout than these April school board elections. So what that meant is instead of Middlesex County having to send ballots to every voter in New Brunswick, some 20,000 people, there would be 8 other towns that are having fire district elections that if Murphy pulled the trigger and said executive order is going to require automatic mail-in ballots, they would have had to mail out ballots to all those other towns that were having these small elections that normally only have one polling place anyway. Normally people just go vote at the firehouse and they make their own ballots. They don't necessarily use the voting machines like a regular normal election. So it would have kind of, been a big change for those fire district elections. Not the worst thing in the world though, to send mail-in ballots and make it easier to vote. Yeah. But I think it would have been a significant expense, and perhaps that's one reason Murphy did not do it. I know Murphy is trying to avoid doing executive orders for the primary and general election because he's on the ballot, and that presents a interesting conflict, right? If he's changing the rules of an election that he's in, so he's trying to be hands off all of a sudden after all of last year, drastically changing the election, sometimes without legislative approval or without thinking it through all the way and not answering all the questions that need to be answered about how it's going to work. Now, all of a sudden, this year, Governor Murphy wants to be hands off and not do anything. So I even asked him about this closure of the polling places. He said this was the first he heard of it, and he's not going to have a comment on it. So, very interesting, all the factors that went into this decision making. But yeah, mail-in ballots are only going out to about 10% of voters. Those are the folks who have signed up to automatically get them for every election. Last year, they went the extra mile and sent them to every active voter. This year, they're not doing it, and it's because of the government.
Wow. So this is the other question. Like, is there a specific reason why the Democrats would want to decrease the vote? Traditionally is Republicans down south, but here we see the Republican was actually sticking up for keeping all the voting locations. Is there any particular reason why they want to decrease the vote, especially in minority communities?
Well, New Brunswick's a very special place. We have had the same family running City Hall since 1979. John Lynch was the mayor prior to his corruption conviction, and now his cousin Jim Cahill's the mayor. And for much of their time in power, they enjoyed the special power to be able to pick the school board. Remember, most communities, we take it for granted that we have school board elections. But here in my city in New Brunswick, until 2012, we had no elections. The mayor got to pick the school board. The school board is, of course, a powerful board. They get to decide critical things about the facilities they run, but also there's a lot of jobs at stake there. Of course, political machines thrive on those patronage positions. that they can dole out to friends and family and supporters. And so controlling that board is still very important to the local political machine, which is controlled entirely by the Democratic Party, Mayor Cahill, the Middlesex County Democratic Organization. And so, there is a desire to make sure that they keep their people in office. And so far, every year we've had an election, the machine candidates have won. This year, there's a strong challenge. There's 3 candidates running against the 3 incumbents. Full disclosure, I'm supporting the 3 challengers. I'm working with them. I'm knocking on doors for them because I believe in them and I want them to win. I think we need a change here in New Brunswick.
Okay.
But the school board, 3 seats on the school board are at stake. So I do think that the old school Democratic machine wants to make sure that those incumbents stay in power and don't lose their seats. And if it's harder to vote and less people vote, it's more likely the incumbents will stay.
Wow, gotcha. So now, did they ever bring up money as an issue? Like they say, oh, we want to close down a couple polls because we don't have enough funds. I'm just curious.
It's a good point. The board of elections did not bring that up. The president of the school board, though, who is one of the candidates running for re-election, we kind of pressed her at a board meeting about, do you support closing these polling places? Shouldn't it be easier to vote? And she said she would like to see more places open if they can afford it. And so I followed up by asking, well, how much does it cost to open a polling place? And they couldn't say. So, at the end of the day, running this kind of election usually costs $40,000 to $60,000, a small price to pay for, the people having the power to pick their school board. And I do think that perhaps, cutting back and saving a little bit of money here or there may have played a role as well, but I won't know for sure. Probably.
I can tell that the Democrat, the guy that was talking, that you and him do not, mesh a little well. I saw that. And I was curious why he got so mad that the Republican, I think he said that he made a comment, or maybe he said something in an article, or he went outside to the press. Why did he got so mad about that?
Yeah, it was a little strange to watch them arguing about news articles, but they did. Commissioner Don Katz, the senior Republican on this election board, did forward me an email that he had sent to the boss at the Board of Elections, Administrator Thomas Lynch, supposedly no relation to John Lynch, the former mayor, convicted felon. But Tom Lynch got this email from Commissioner Katz saying, whoa, we didn't approve this. Correct this immediately. We've never done anything like this before, and we don't want to close down these polling locations. And he, had cited an email that he had gotten from, constituents. Students First candidates were, getting their supporters to send emails to the board, the Board of Elections. And when Katz got those emails, he, responded and reached out to his people to say, don't do this, put the brakes on this. And he forwarded me a copy of that email. I included quotes from that in my article that was published, and that really got under the skin of Dan Frankel, the longest serving member and the senior Democrat on that election commission. I'm not quite sure the logic of what he was mad about. Mr. Katz never said the whole board agrees with me. He was speaking only for himself, but Mr. Frankel definitely was upset that was published.
Wow. Yeah, this is definitely a very interesting case study of local politics, why it matters for us to be involved in our local politics to see what's going on. And man, thank you for bringing this story, Charlie. This was definitely interesting. And I want to definitely, I hope you and, Students First, as you guys continue to fight in that area, I'm looking forward to seeing the success we get, and I'm looking forward to see what happens. So is it official that they're going to be shutting down 3 polls and they're leaving 2? Is that official?
4 of the places will be shut down, including the Rutgers Labor Education Center, without a good explanation. So far, the only explanation is Rutgers never answered our request. It's actually illegal for public buildings to not accept a request from the Board of Elections to use their space for an election. And so we're going to continue to investigate and look into that. But at this point, it appears to be too late to change anything. We did get 2 of the places back. So the Housing Authority building at 7 Van Dyke Avenue and the Roosevelt School at 83 Livingston Avenue are going to be open. And that's only because of the community outrage and opposition. I also just want to take a minute to thank the Institute for Social Justice and all of the other organizations that signed on to a letter to the Board of Elections about this. This was an issue that caught us all by surprise when they decided not to do the automatic mail-ins and slash the polling places nearly in half. The Institute for Social Justice and other great organizations like the League of Women Voters, the ACLU of New Jersey, all got together and signed on to this letter. And those organizations are now going to be even more vigilant about these kind of issues as we move to statewide elections in the primary and general election. We want to make sure that as many polling locations are open as possible. And so the fact that this happened and we were able to respond quickly is going to put everybody on notice and make everybody more vigilant and watchful for this type of thing in other communities as we move into those larger elections later in the year. So thanks to everybody who fought the fight with us. And, we didn't totally win everything we wanted to, but we did move in the right direction, make some progress, and get this issue on everybody's radar.